Let's talk about healthy aging. When I think about healthy aging, and you may have your own ideas about it, I think of healthy aging as optimal functioning at whatever age we are. And optimal is defined by you, personally. If we think about healthy aging as a stool, a three-legged stool, one leg is nutrition, which I think you've been dealing with through this conference. One leg is movement or exercise, which you've also been dealing with. And the third leg is the mind. And that's what we're going to focus on today. The effect of the mind on healthy aging, on the body, on healing, and on health. So a little history. In 1975, a research experimenter at the University of Rochester thought that he wanted to experiment with rats to see if they could associate the taste of saccharin, the sweet taste of saccharin, with nausea. So he gave the rats saccharin, and he paired it with a drug called cyclophosphamide, which would turn their stomachs. Instead, the rats started to die. So he stopped administering the cyclophosphamide, continued administering the saccharin. The rats still died. What was going on? He didn't know. So he did some research and found that cyclophosphamide is a powerful immune system suppressant. So he called another guy. He called Nicholas Cohen in, who was an immunologist. He said, let's study this problem together. Why are the rats dying? And what they realized is that the rats had taught themselves to suppress their immune systems with the taste of saccharin. In other words, the rats were literally killing themselves with their minds. Okay? Get that? So that started them thinking, this is opening up a whole new field of study. And what they did was they created this study called psychoneuroimmunology. It's a big word. You use it, people think you're smart. See? You think I'm smart, right? Ology, study. Psycho, the mind. And by the mind, we're referring to thoughts, feelings, actions, intuition, imagination, all that's comprised of the mind. Neuro, the brain and the central nervous system, and the immune system. So it's the relationship between the mind, the brain, and the central nervous system, and the immune system. So they created this study. It didn't get much traction until a year later. A man named Norman Cousins, whom many of you may have heard of, he published an article in the New England Journal of Medicine where he wrote about his experiences. He recounted his experiences of curing himself of a rare blood disease, ankylosing spondylitis or something like that, using laughter. He locked himself in a motel room and watched Laurel and Hardy, I Love Lucy, Candid Camera, the Marx Brothers, and he just sat there and laughed. And lo and behold, he laughed himself cured. Okay? So he wrote about this in the New England Journal of Medicine. Why he did this was that he had read the study of the rats that these guys were doing and the whole study of psychoneuroimmunology, PNI, and he thought, well, that's the downside. You know, with our minds, maybe we can make ourselves sick. Can we make ourselves well with hope, love, laughter, positive thinking, goodwill? Can those things affect our health? The answer is yes, as it turns out. From his research article, in the New England Journal of Medicine, that spurred on a wealth of studies that were done. Some in this country, mostly in Europe. It really picked up in Europe. And around the same time, a couple, Stephanie and Carl Simonton at the University of Texas, and a friend of theirs named James Creighton, were working with people with cancer. And what they had seen is that the people with cancer their attitudes were really poor. They were despondent, they were depressed, they were pessimistic, they were hopeless. And so they thought, also understanding these relationships, can we change attitudes? And if we changed attitudes, can we affect the illness? So what they did was they taught a group. They had an experimental group and a control group. The control group received radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, standard procedures for cancer in the 1970s. They had an experimental group who received chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, but they were also taught visualization techniques, how to visualize their tumors shrinking, how to visualize themselves getting healthy, how to visualize themselves being more positive. And what they found was that the people in the experimental group shrunk their tumors twice as fast as the people in the control group. So, what does this say to us? What does this say to us? It says to us that we have control over our physiological processes, over our anatomy, with our minds. We do. We're not taught this for some reason. This is not like, I mean, it's sort of common knowledge. It's, things that our grandmothers used to tell us, but it's not really common practice in hospital settings, in medical settings in this country. It is overseas. So, the Netherlands, for example, there is an institute called the Helen Dowling Institute in Rotterdam, and I've been there. And Helen Dowling was a British woman who had cancer, and she worked with a mentor of mine named Marco de Vries using visual imagery. This is way back in the 70s, on her cancer. And she was cured of her cancer. And she had a great deal of money, and she gave a whole bunch of money. She gave a wad of money to Marco, and he created this Helen Dowling Institute on this corner in Rotterdam. And the Helen Dowling Institute is now funded by the Dutch government. They're pretty advanced. The Dutch government is paying the therapists and the nurses and the doctors who work at this institute. And so it's free. It's free to Dutch citizens. And on the walls, for example, on the walls of this institute are photographs of cancer cells being surrounded by B cells, killer cells, and the killer cells killing the cancer. And the reason why they do this is because one of the things that they found is that if you visualize close to the actual physiological process that's going on in your body, and you actually and you visualize the anatomy rather than more abstract visualizations like lights and cameras and whatever, it's more effective. You get better results. So they wanted people to see what was going on in their bodies so that when they do the visualization, they can see that. The Helen Dowling Institute was also one of the first places that discovered that women with breast cancer who attended a support group had twice the length of life expectancy as women who did not. They also found that gay men with AIDS who attended support groups also had healthier lives. They didn't necessarily live longer than the men who were just receiving AZT and DDI at the time, but they lived healthier. They lived healthier lives until that point of death. And so with that in mind, when I was one of the founders of the Brattleboro AIDS Project, and I started these support groups, a support group down there, and then I crossed the mountains and started a support group in Bennington, because I realized the importance of support groups for people, for men with AIDS. So, a little bit of my history, just how I got involved in this. In 1980, I was a student, graduate student working on my doctorate. I was a first-year student. I was living in San Francisco. And it was around the time of finals. And all the students were really stressed out, and, up to here in work and studying and fear, anxiety. So we decided to go to Golden Gate Park. At the end of Golden Gate Park, there was a field, and we decided we were going to play touch football. It was over by the ocean. And we were playing touch football. And the fog rolled in, as it tends to do in San Francisco that time of year. the grass became very slippery. And I was running to catch a pass, and I slipped on the grass, and my leg did something really weird. It did something like, I don't know. My knee went one way, my leg went one way, my body went one way, and I heard this crack. And yeah, and the pain was searing. But I was filled with adrenaline. I got up, I continued playing, and I was in a carpool. And on the way home, on the drive home, I had been meditating at that point for a few years, and I started meditating. And in my meditation, I heard with my inner ear, my mind's ear, I heard my knee say, "Keep me straight and warm." I didn't think much of it. So I went home, and I was working at the time part-time at the California School for the Deaf as a psychologist, and I was crossing the bridge. I had my little Corolla with the standard transmission, so I was using my knee a lot, and I was walking around, and the pain just got worse and worse and worse. And I was living in the Haight-Ashbury section of the city. At that time, it was sort of the tail end of the hippie movement. And I went to one of the free health clinics that were there. So these doctors, they were, looked like they were half my age. They were, examined my knee and tisking. Very bad, very bad. And they took x-rays, and they came to me and they said, "We have some bad news for you, and we have some good news for you." What's the bad news? The bad news is that you've torn your medial meniscus. There's no cure for that other than surgery. Menisci do not heal themselves. So I said, what am I going to do? And he said, but the good news is we have this new form of surgery, which now I understand to be arthroscopic. What I heard was that they were going to shrink these doctors and nurses into little vials and inject them into my knee, and they were going to sew it up. So I said, there's no way. I had no health insurance, I had no money, and it was finals time. I didn't have any time. So I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to do surgery. I could not do it. So I left the clinic, and I was feeling really, really despondent. And one of the doctors followed me out, and he said, I get it, the pain that you're in. Here, you're going to need surgery eventually. In the meantime, take these crutches, take this knee brace, and a couple of times a day, put a hot water bottle or a heating pad on your knee. And as I thanked him, and I was walking away, I realized that what the doctor had said to me was keep your knee straight and warm, which is exactly what my knee had told me 5 days earlier. And when I was walking home, suddenly I felt uplifted. Now wait a minute. My knee gave me really good information. Maybe I can do something about this. Maybe I can take charge of this. So I went back, I told a lot of my friends about what was going on, and one of my friends gave me this tape, an audio tape by Emmett Miller called The Healing Journey. Emmett Miller had studied with the Simontons at the University of Texas, and he created this tape where he, ironically, had little doctors and nurses going into the part of the body that needed healing and healing it up. So for 45 minutes, twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, I would lie on the bed with a heating pad on my knee, listening to this tape, and then flipping it over, and it's just music on the back. It's really soft, new age kind of beautiful music. And I noticed something. Over time, the pain was decreasing. And I had another friend who was a physical therapist, and she gave me some exercises to do. One of them was to stand against the wall and start doing deep knee bends. And at first, I could do an inch. But I noticed that I was going deeper and deeper and deeper as time went on. In 6 weeks, I went back to the clinic. I handed them the crutches and the knee brace, and I said, thank you very much. I don't need it anymore. That was in 1980. To this day, I'm not even sure which knee it was. I have injured since then both knees, one in a ski accident, one in a bike accident. My knees are fine. I still have 2 knees that are mine. And that spurred me on to looking at the illnesses, the injuries, whatever I developed over the years as opportunities to work on them with my mind. And I have been very successful. I also then started to use it with my clients as a psychotherapist. So clients would come in with arthritis, with this, with that, and I would say, let's try something. Let's try, adding visualization, adding meditation, adding mental power to whatever the doctors are telling you to do. And they did. And I started to develop a reputation. This is in New Hampshire at the time. I started to develop a reputation of working with people with illness. And then I started working with people with AIDS. And over the years, I started getting better at this, better at being a therapist for people and better at myself. About 12 years ago, I had started to develop this fever, and I was, I went to bed, and this searing pain started to grow in my body. I thought I was having a heart attack. So I went in, I checked, and my heart said, "It's not your heart," and showed me a picture, which I didn't understand at the time. But later I understood, because of the doctor said, well, it's either a hiatal hernia, or it's this, or it's gallbladder, or it's esophagitis. And as soon as he said gallbladder, I knew that was it, because that was the picture that my body had shown me. I had gallstones, and I had cholecystitis. Now, I'm not supposed to have gallstones. My mother had gallstones. My sister had gallstones. My Aunt Phyllis had gallstones. My grandmother had gallstones. I don't have gallstones. I had gallstones. And so the surgeon came in, and he said, "You got to have it out. You got to take your gallbladder out." I said, "What, are you kidding me? I get separation anxiety when I get a haircut. What am I going to be like if you start yanking organs out of my body?" I wasn't going to do that. So I said, "No, thanks." And I went to my neighbor, a friend of mine who's a homeopathic physician, and he said, well, they put me on antibiotics because I was infected. My gallbladder was infected. So he put me on, he said, eat some yogurt, take lecithin, and use your visualization, see what you can do with that, because you don't want surgery. Try visualization. Well, I did. And I talked to my gallbladder talked to me, and what it said to me is, tell you the truth, I don't really like what my gallbladder says. So I don't pay much attention to it. And what happened was I had another attack a year later. And then 2 years later, I had another attack. Finally, I got it. I better start listening to my gallbladder, So I did. I haven't had any issues. I still have my gallbladder. I do get haircuts. So that's my story. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about we have time? Yeah. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the studies that are being done or have been done. So Caroline talked about forgiveness and the workings of the mind. About 20 years ago, I think it was at Stanford University, psychologists took a group of subjects, sat them down, showed them pictures of that were designed to elicit specific emotional responses. So some of these pictures made them sad, some made them happy, some made them laugh, some made them angry, some made them scared. Specific emotional responses. Meanwhile, simultaneously, they were drawing blood and measuring immune system response to those emotional reactions. What they found was not what most people were expecting. You just you get angry, your immune system goes down, you feel happy, your immune system goes up. No, it's not what they found. What they found was it didn't matter what emotion the person experienced, it's what you did with the emotion that matters. So if they were angry and they banged on the table, their immune system was happy. If they were angry and they just sat there stoically, their immune system was depressed. And the same was true with every feeling, whether it was peaceful, loving, fearful. If they expressed in some way, moved their body in some way, the immune system was happy. If they didn't, the exact opposite took place. So what I want to do is just imagine a clock. Imagine a clock. 24 hours, okay? 24 hours ago, what is it, 11 o'clock now, let's say? Okay, 11 o'clock now. 11 o'clock yesterday, human beings began, okay? That was when we stood up from all fours and started to walk on 2 feet. Australopithecus, or whatever they were called then, that was the dawn of humankind, okay? 24 hours have come by, and it's now 11 o'clock again. And here we are, 24 hours later. Let me ask you this. What do you think? How long ago did we step out of our caves and start planting seeds? How long ago did we start to become agrarian? What do you think?
11:30. I mean 10:30.
10:30.
Yeah.
Anybody have any other guesses? Yeah.
Well, 3/4 of the way around.
It was actually 8 minutes ago. This is perspective. 8 minutes ago, we stepped out of our caves. We stepped out of our caves and started planting seeds. It was, oh no, I don't have it. Okay. The bridge between Asia and North America was crossed 6.5 minutes ago. That's when humankind started populating the North American continent. Okay? Buddha became enlightened 38 seconds ago. Jesus was crucified 28 seconds ago. Okay? The Industrial Revolution started 5 seconds ago, 6 seconds ago. The nuclear family became the central feature of human society about 3 seconds ago. And the automobile changed the way of life about 2 seconds ago. This is the perspective that I want us to take. So for 11 hours, before we started to plant seeds, for 11 hours and 50 minutes, 23 hours and 50 minutes, we basically lived the same way. We lived in our caves, or our yurts, or our teepees, and we walked. We walked to the hunt, we walked to the blueberry patch, we walked to the river to carry water, and we walked back with the water. When we were done with those chores, what we did was we did our creative work. We painted the caves of the walls, we made our tools, we made our clothing, we made our jewelry, we created. At the end of the day, we had dinner with the clan, everybody sitting around the fire, and we talked. We talked to each other. We listened to each other. We told each other about our day. We told each other about our dreams. And this is what we did for 4.5 million years, okay? When somebody had the great idea that we needed to start planting foods, everything changed, okay? Our bodies, however, are still adapted to those 23 hours and 50 minutes, okay? So we walked out of a cave one morning, and we're faced with a saber-toothed tiger. What do? What happens is the adaptive part of our bodies secretes adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, these what we call now stress-related hormones, because that was a very stressful situation to see this cat, this huge cat, who thought we looked like a nice tender morsel for lunch. So what we do is we get all this energy from these enzymes and biochemicals. We take a rock and we throw it, and then we run like hell. That's how we survived as a species from the big cats. Excuse me 1 minute. So our bodies are designed to react to emotional situations. We are supposed to react. That's what our bodies did for 23 hours and 50 minutes, 52 minutes. Today, and then when we were running, what happened was all these chemicals eventually funneled into our kidneys and out, okay? Now today, we sit in our little cubicles, and the boss comes to us and starts yelling at us. You didn't get the report in on time, or we're sitting in traffic and it's, and getting really angry, but we don't throw rocks and we don't run like hell. We sit there. So what happens is these hormones keep coursing through our bodies. They don't know to go because there hasn't been an action. These hormones, in a sense, know to leave the body after the action has taken place. If there's no action, they just keep coursing through our bodies. And the problem with these hormones is they're great in the moment. They help us throw the rock and run like hell. But if they keep coursing through our bodies, they wear us down. They're destructive to the immune system, they're destructive to the brain, they're destructive to the heart, they're destructive to the kidneys, et cetera, et cetera. They have to leave. Okay? So, with all emotions, our bodies are still adapted to that early time. Society has changed in the last 8 minutes, but our bodies have not caught up. So we still have to do what our bodies are designed to do if we want to stay healthy. Now that doesn't mean that if you're pissed off, you go into the nearest post office with your Uzi and shoot it up. But you need to find adaptive, healthy ways of expressing your anger. Now this is New England. New Englanders don't do that. Italians do, you know. I'm Italian. My sister's in the back of the room. We scream at each other all the time. That's what we do. So we have great immune systems. So no matter what the feeling is, give people a hug. You know, if you're feeling that, give each other a hug. So in another study, there's an experiment they had rats in cages that were, like 6 or so cages wide and maybe 8 cages high. It's like a big apartment house for rats. And these rats were administered cholesterol-building drugs because they wanted to see what effect these drugs had on these rats' heart. So they gave these rats these drugs, then eventually they killed the rats, they examined their hearts, and they found that most of the rats had serious heart disease. But there was a small group of rats, like 1/6, 1/8, something like that, that had no heart disease at all. How did this happen? So they repeated the whole thing. Same thing happened. Exact same percentage of rats stayed healthy, and the same percentage of rats had serious heart disease. What was going on? What was going on? Turns out that the woman that they hired to clean the cages and to feed the rats at night was a short woman. She could only reach the bottom layer of rats. And she would take each of those rats out. They would crawl on her. The rats are very affectionate, by the way. I know they have a bad reputation, but they're really sweet animals. Because I've worked with them. I like them. Anyway, I don't think my sister would want them in the house. But anyway, so these rats, they would play with each other. They would interact with each other. Rats are very social. So are we. Rats are very tactile. So are we. The rats that got to play with each other and got touched by her had no heart disease despite the fact that they were given cholesterol-building drugs. Okay? In 2 separate experiments. Interesting. Along these same lines, a group of experimenters went into this major supermarket in a city, and they instructed every other cashier, touch the customer as they come through. Just touch them. Hold their hand, touch their hands, touch their shoulders. When you pass the money back, the change back, make sure you touch them, okay? The alternate cashier was told, under no circumstances are you to touch the customer. Then what the experimenters did, the psychologists did, is they went outside the store and they posed themselves as market analysts. And as people were coming out, they would ask these people, how'd you like the store? The people who were not touched said, Hannaford's, Price Chopper, Shaw's, one's the same as the other. The ones who were touched said, oh, it's fabulous. Prices are better, the music is better, the aisles are bigger, the lighting is better. They liked the store. The only difference is that they were touched. We need to be touched. The skin is the largest organ of the body. It needs stimulation. And we tend not to touch each other. We need to end. Yeah, there you go. That's it. Now, there are always appropriate and inappropriate ways of expressing your feelings, you know. So keep that in mind when you're about to touch people or when you're about to express your anger or be affectionate. Keep that in mind there. Yeah. Another study. They took people with cancer, and they gave them a test of optimism. Okay? So this test then divided people up into three groups: optimistic, realistic, pessimistic. Okay? The optimists believed it's all going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. I'm going to survive. The realists said, well, let me see. Let me do some research on this. I'll see what other adjunctive therapies I could do. Blah. The pessimist said, oh, nothing is going to work. I'm going to die. What they found, you know, probably obviously, is that the optimists live longer, much longer, statistically significantly longer than the realists, and the realists lived statistically significantly longer than the pessimists. Okay? So as an example, I had a client come in with prostate cancer. Actually, you know, his wife came in. I could see her, you know, sort of pulling. You need to see Michael. And she was pulling on his ear and getting him to sit down. And he had prostate cancer. He said, oh, I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it. It's awful. I got to get all my affairs together. And so I have this healing, what I call a healing profile. I ask questions. Do you own a pet? You know, how do you express your feelings? What kind of exercise do you get? What's your diet like, et cetera? Just to check on all the variables of health and healing. And when I got to optimism, are you optimistic? His wife just rolled her eyes and said, oh my God, if there's a silver lining, John's going to find the dark cloud. He's an Irish Catholic mother, and he's just, everything is doom and gloom with her, and same with him. And it was true. And I saw that my work was cut out for me with him. I had to help him change his attitude so that he could be more positive. He did. He survived. He's fine. And I can't say that it was because of the work that we did, because I don't have any controlled studies. All I know is that he thought it had a lot to do with it. He thought that his changing his attitude had a major impact on his healing. Was something else I was going to say about that? Well, it's gone. Let's see. I want to read something about Ivan Pavlov. Now, you probably know about Pavlov and his dogs. He, you know, associated bell ringing with salivating and feeding. And she was a psychologist in Russia. Peace of mind creates the most conducive conditions for physical healing. The great behaviorist Ivan Pavlov lay dying of a widespread, I can't read my own handwriting here, dying of a widespread infection years before the discovery of antibiotics. He sent an assistant to the river with the odd task of bringing back a bucket of warm mud. That done, Pavlov stuck his hands in the bucket and began to play in the mud like a child. A few hours later, his fever broke. He reasoned that if he could recreate the most peaceful, wonderful moment of his life, his body would have the maximal chance to heal. Remembering that his mother used to do her laundry in the river when he was a child, telling him stories as he played contentedly in the mud, he recreated that scene, and sure enough, his body returned to homeostasis, inner balance. When I was living in San Francisco, one of the things that I noticed is that, I mean, California is pretty warm for the most part, but it's not San Francisco. It's a cold, damp city. The fog rolls in. I mean, I love the climate, but it's cold and it's damp. And one of the things I noticed on a route that I would walk every day, one side of the street, because of the buildings and the angle of the sun, one side of the street was always, you know, sort of in the shade. And in the shade in San Francisco, it's cold and it's damp. The other side of the street is sunny and warm. And my route would take me on the shady side of the street. And one day it occurred to me, wait a minute, I don't have to be cold. I could cross the street, walk on the sunny side of the street, and I'd get to the same place at the same time. And I thought, this is a metaphor for my life. Walking on the sunny side of the street is a choice. Being pessimistic is a choice. I mean, some of us think we're locked into this, oh, I can't get any better. It's a choice. Your pessimism is your choice. Your optimism is your choice. Yeah, and you can change it. Now, one of the most exciting, we still have time, right? 15 minutes. Okay. One of the most exciting pieces of research that's going on right now is in the field of telomeres and telomerase. I should write that down here. Some of you may know about this. Inside the nucleus of every cell of your body is a chromosome, which is the package that communicates all the genetic material from parents to children. On the tips of every chromosome is a little covering, a little protective covering, like the aglets on a shoelace, you know, the little plastic thing, plastic covering on the shoe. Okay, so there's this covering on the tip of every chromosome. This covering is called a telomere. As the cells divide, and they have to divide for us to grow and age, and as the cells divide and reproduce themselves, the telomere, each telomere gets a little shorter, and a little shorter, and a little shorter. And when it reaches a critical point, the telomere can no longer, the cell can no longer divide. Okay, it's stuck. As cells can no longer divide, they age and they die. As they age, so do we. So a group of researchers wanted to find out, is there a way to slow down the process of shrinking telomeres? So they took a whole bunch of people, subjects, up to a resort high in the Rocky Mountains, and they put them through all sorts of tests. They fed them certain foods. They denied them certain foods. They gave them certain levels of exercise. They denied them levels of exercise. They taught them meditation, not meditation, etc. They did all sorts of variables. They provided all sorts of variables. And they found that not only could we prevent telomeres from shrinking, but we could actually grow them. And what they also found is that telomerase is an enzyme in the body that governs the shrinking or growing of telomeres. The more telomerase, the healthier the cell. Now there's one big caveat here, and that is that cancer cells glom telomerase, and that makes them immortal. So how do we prevent cancer cells from taking the telomerase? So I had a client named Laura who had breast cancer, and she was kind of later stages. And she called me and she said, I want you to work with me on visualization. I want to visualize. She knew about this. She was very sophisticated. She knew about telomerase and telomeres, and she said, I want you to teach me to visualize the cancer cells being denied the telomerase, and instead the telomerase going to the cells surrounding the tumor. So I said, okay, this is an interesting thing. Maybe we can help. So, so we did. We embarked on this therapy. And she did eventually die of cancer, but she went into remission first. Now, I can't say that her visualization created the remission. She thought so. Now, let me talk a little bit about remission. That's an interesting topic. Because when you have a cold and you no longer have a cold, you're cured of the cold. When you have cancer and you no longer have cancer, you're in remission. Okay? The terminology is different. The experience is different. So some experimenters said, okay, let's play with this. So they told a bunch of people who were in remission, you're in remission. They told a bunch of people who were cancer-free, you're cured. What do you think happened? The cured people stayed cured far longer than the remission people. How a doctor speaks to us, when we give the doctor a lot of power, the way he or she speaks to us has a profound effect. Placebos, placebo, I please, or something like that. You know what placebos are, right? They've been used for centuries. People have been using placebos. Now, you can't, the ethics of medical treatment says you cannot give a placebo without telling a person that they're getting a placebo. So the doctors, they did this experiment and they started to tell people, this is a placebo. It's not going to do any good. It's a sugar pill. It's not going to help. Bingo, the people got better anyway. Because it came from it came from a doctor. They got better anyway. What can I say? So, what speeds up the shortening of telomeres? Now, before I tell you this, I'm going to pass around the hat, and you've got to put money in the hat for me. This is the fountain of youth. Okay. Cognitive stress. Ruminating thoughts over the past, anticipatory worry about the future, perceived threats. Shrink your telomeres. Stressful events in life. Overeating. Emotional stress. Insulin resistance, not BMI, interestingly enough. BMI had not, body mass index, about that number. It had nothing to do with the shrinking of telomeres, but insulin resistance did. That's when your natural hormone insulin becomes less effective in lowering blood sugar. And the presence of free radicals or oxidative stress, any atom or molecule that has a single unpaired electron in an outer shell. Antioxidants, such as vitamins A, C, and E, reduce free radicals. Okay. So what lengthens telomeres? Interested? Pass that hat. Exercise, number one. And what they did was they took 3 groups, high level of exercise, medium level of exercise, low levels of exercise. And what they found was that the high level of exercise had the greatest lengthening of telomeres, the medium, and the lowest. But even the low group had a lengthening of telomeres. Social connections, going back to sitting around the campfire when we talked for 4.5 million years. Social connections. Stress reduction, any kind of perspective taking, meditation, walking, a low-fat diet, high in fruits, vegetables, and fiber, and yoga. There's a yoga teacher extraordinaire over here. Yoga has been shown to be very effective in increasing the size of telomeres. Decreasing your weight, finding purpose in your life. Now, a lot of people who are retired or retiring lose that sense of purpose. If you lose your sense of purpose, your telomeres are going to start shrinking at a faster rate. Find purpose in your life. Good stress lengthens, what's called eustress. Good kinds of stress, like your granddaughter being born, that kind of stuff, lengthens telomeres. And high levels of vitamin D in the blood has been shown to be associated with lengthening of telomeres. I want to talk a little bit about the brain, because the brain is very specific. There are 5 ways to strengthen the brain. The brain can be strengthened. We used to think that it couldn't, but it can be. And the brain can reproduce, the brain cells can be reproduced. We used to think that they couldn't, but they can. So, 5 ways to strengthen the brain. Social interaction. stress reduction, physical activity, mental activity, and diet. Again, the social interaction is really important. It's not just, hey, how you doing? How about them Mets? You know, it's really talking about your feelings and talking about yourself. They did this, there was this group of women in Wisconsin who were part of a coffee clutch, like 6 women. They've been meeting for 30, 40 years. And what some experimenters did, they found these women, they said, let's find out, you know, what kind of effect did this have on them, this coffee clutch thing. And what they found is that these 6 women, all 6 of them, they had been through cancers and deaths and diseases, but they're all still alive when the experimenters got a hold of them. And they did this, I don't know, CAT scans, TMI, whatever they did to their brain. They found that their brains were far healthier than what you would expect from people that age, from women that age. The only difference that they could see is that they were involved in this deep social connection for 40 years, 30, 40 years. When you're not talking to someone else, talk to yourself. I know that sounds crazy, but it actually helps. It actually helps. Say it out loud. It's not only that, it's not only good for your brain, but it's also a strategy for remembering. I do that now when I'm in the shower. Always, for some reason, when I'm in the shower, I remember what I'm supposed to do. And I always, then when I get out of the shower, I forget. So I started talking to myself in the shower. It works. Get a good night's sleep. Meditate. And what they found is that what you need is 12 minutes a day. That's it. It doesn't even have to be 12 minutes at one time. It could be 3 minutes here, 4 minutes here, 5 minutes here. 12 minutes a day is optimal. That's all. It's not much. Get a massage. And do some favorite things for yourself. And deep breathing. I'm going to teach you what I call Weil's breath. Andrew Weil is a researcher. He's big in the, he's sort of a new age guru. He developed this at the University of Arizona. He developed this style of deep breathing, which has been shown to help memory and brain functioning. So I'm going to teach it to you right now. And this is the process. You're going to breathe in. First of all, you relax yourself, close your eyes. When your mouth is relaxed, your tongue just naturally floats to the roof of your mouth. So let your tongue float to the roof of your mouth. We're going to breathe in through our nose to the count of 4. Hold your breath to the count of 7. Breathe out through your mouth to the count of 8. We're going to do that 2 times, okay? So let yourself just get relaxed. Close your eyes. Let your tongue float to the roof of your mouth. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out through your mouth. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. How do you feel? Just check inside. How do you feel? Feel different than when you started? We did 2 cycles. Optimal is 8, but work up to that. 8 cycles takes about 2 minutes to do 8 cycles of this. We can all spare 2 minutes a day. And it's going to help your brain. Okay? The last thing I want to talk about is humor. So humor me while I find my thing on humor. I can't seem to find it. laughter is very important. So, oh, here we go. When we laugh, we're oxygenating the brain. We are exercising our abdomen. We are helping the immune system. Belly laughter is really good medicine. In fact, 20 seconds of good belly laughter is the cardiovascular equivalent of 3 minutes of strenuous rowing. Okay? All right.
How long is that? How long?
20 seconds,
20 seconds?
yeah, of strenuous laughter is the cardiovascular equivalent of 3 minutes of strenuous rowing. It's like the best exercise there is around. So with that in mind, what I'm going to leave you with is this. Somebody sent me this about the fabulous Jewish comedians that used to go to the Catskills of the vaudeville days, like Shecky Green, Red Buttons, Toady Fields, Joey Bishop, Don Rickles, Jack Benny, Manuel Rubinstein, Zero Mostel. And there was not one single swear word in their comedy. And here's just a few of their examples. I just got back from a pleasure trip. I took my mother-in-law to the airport. I've been in love with the same woman for 49 years. If my wife ever finds out, she'll kill me. Someone stole all my credit cards, but I won't be reporting it. The thief spends less than my wife did. We always hold hands because if I don't, she shops. Why don't Jewish mothers drink? Answer: alcohol interferes with their suffering. Why do Jewish mothers make great parole officers? They never let anyone finish a sentence. A man called his mother in Florida. Mom, how are you? Not too good, said the mother. I've been very weak. The son said, why are you so weak? She said, because I haven't eaten in 38 days. The son said, that's terrible. Why haven't you eaten in 38 days? The mother said, God forbid my son should call. I should have my mouth full. For that.